So let's look at supplements, because supplements have come up. And I think that I'm not going to go through all of these. Vitamin D and resveratrol and chocolate I'll talk about a little bit more. Fish oils I think are interesting. Initially there were some studies with fish oils suggesting that that in people with cardiovascular disease who took fish oils, there was decreased arrhythmias. With the introduction, if you combine that with the statin medication, all that benefit goes away. So fish oils, I mean, there's a plus minus. For some people it may be of benefit. For some people it may not. The downside of fish oils, you just have to be careful that you know your source, because some are contaminated with mercury, because fish comes from deep water, fish oils come from deep water fish. And so know your manufacturer and ask if they can show you that it's been independently bioassayed. You know, so you know what's in it is really in it, okay? Because there's no regulation of the supplement industry. It's a blind item, you know, for a lot of us. Probiotics, healthy bacteria, are sort of interesting because they sort of help regulate the immune system. You know, having healthy bacteria is important. Probably like 60% of our immune system is located along our GI tract. Why? Because it's what separates the outside world from the inside world. You know, so it makes sense that a large part of our immune system is there, right? And probiotics, healthy bacteria, seem to have a immune regulating effect. In other words, when your body needs to react and upregulate, it does. When it downregulates, it downregulates. So I like probiotics as a supplement. And now they've become a little bit more mainstream. Now there are a lot of mainstream journals recommending that people give probiotics along with antibiotics to help prevent antibiotic-associated diarrhea. So they're becoming more mainstream than they used to be. Minerals, there's some old studies suggesting that selenium may be helpful for prostate health. We find that molybdenum as a mineral may be helpful in asthma. It helps with sulfation, which is a part of a liver detoxification pathway. B vitamins, I think, are helpful if you're B vitamin deficient, but probably not otherwise. Folic acid is a very interesting supplement, which is a B vitamin. If you take low doses, it seems to be helpful, but in high doses is associated with an increased incidence of colon cancer. So while folic acid actually helps prevent neural tube defects if you're pregnant in babies, but in high doses actually is associated with increased incidence of colon cancer. Resveratrol I'll talk about in a little bit. Coenzyme Q10, we do recommend if you're taking a statin medication. Coenzyme Q10 is a cofactor for energy production, and the statin medications decrease your coenzyme Q10 level. So we generally recommend 200 milligrams per day of coenzyme Q10. Now aspirin is not a supplement, but aspirin is pretty cheap, you know, like 10 bucks for 100. For 81 milligram aspirin, and aspirin really is associated with the decreased incidence of colon cancer. What's interesting about aspirin is that the cardiovascular benefits of it have come into question. It's not clear that it really has that significant a benefit for a lot of people, particularly if you don't appear to be at risk for a cardiovascular event. So it doesn't really seem to have a widespread protective effect, but it does seem to have one for colon cancer. Coenzyme Q10? Coenzyme Q10 is a supplement that is a cofactor for your mitochondria, for your energy production, and statins seem to decrease the levels of it. So if you take it, it helps prevent the side effects. It's over the counter. The only important thing is to get it in the gel cap form, because it's better absorbed if it's in fat than if it's in a powder form. All the coenzyme Q10 basically came from the same factory in Japan, so it really doesn't matter so much where you get it. It's not like one brand is going to be better as long as it is really in it, better than another. Although, fortunately, that plant I don't think was anywhere near the nuclear reactor. I guess that wouldn't be a good thing. But vitamin D, I think, has gotten a lot of press over the last several years, and there have been studies showing that a 7% increase in longevity in people who take vitamin D supplements. That does not mean if you take a vitamin D supplement you're going to live longer. What they just found is when they went back and looked at people who took vitamin D supplements, they tended to live longer than people who didn't. Okay? So there have been studies showing that there's deficiency of vitamin D associated with colon cancer, breast cancer, and prostate cancer, but that does not mean that by taking that you're going to necessarily prevent it. But vitamin D really acts more like a hormone than a vitamin, because there are receptors for vitamin D, like in muscle and in brain and in bone, obviously. So taking vitamin D is really not a bad idea, and very, very low downside. There's no downside that I know of if you take between 2,000 and 4,000 IUs, international units a day. The interesting thing that I think about vitamin D is some of the stuff that I'm really interested in, which is asthma research, which they've shown that it seems to be one of the causes of the increased incidence of asthma that we're seeing is that vitamin D deficiency in utero. And we're beginning to see that what happens in utero really does have a big impact on what happens in offspring. So the combination of vitamin D deficiency and people taking Tylenol or acetaminophen does seem to have an impact on offspring developing asthma. The other thing that I've seen with vitamin D is in people that have severely low vitamin D levels, they can get proximal muscle weakness, and by repleting that proximal muscle weakness goes away. Resveratrol is a component of red wine, and I think is an interesting supplement because it seems to upregulate the sirtuin enzyme, which is also upregulated by low-calorie diets. Now, whether that portends a similar benefit to people eating low-calorie diets, I don't really know. I don't know if there's any evidence of that. But there are some animal studies that show it helps reverse metabolic syndrome and has anti-cancer effects, and also reduces inflammation in some other studies. So there's really no downside that I know of from that supplement. So it's sort of an interesting one. Dark chocolate does have anti-hypertensive and anti-inflammatory, anti-thrombotic, and positive metabolic effects. I mean, that's been studied. There was a recent study that came out in the British Medical Journal that actually showed that by taking dark chocolate every day, this was 60 to 70% cocoa, that actually they estimated that you would prevent 85 MIs in 10,000 people, you know, compared to not doing anything, which is really pretty statistically significant. I mean, it's not as effective as a statin, but then it tastes of a whole lot better than a statin, you know. And so there's a lot of interest now in developing supplements, or I mark my words, there will be supplements that are dark chocolate derived and with the polyphenols in dark chocolate. It was interesting. So I figured, well, I've been talking about sugars, so now I have to look at dark chocolate and see how much sugar is in dark chocolate. You know, and I did look it up. I went on the Ghirardelli bag, you know, because I have an affinity for chocolate chips, as my daughter will tell you. If you look in a serving, which is 16 chocolate chips, there's 6 grams of sugar, which is probably less than most breakfast cereals. So I figured, you know, that's not like the worst thing in the world. But simple strategies to reduce environmental exposure: don't smoke. Okay, number one, right? We've established that. Keep water away from the house. That helps keep humidity low, helps prevent mold and dust mite problems. One of the things I don't understand is that we know that there's evidence like BPA, which is a component of plastic bottles, is probably not a good thing, right? So why use plastic bottles at all? Because we don't know what the other components of plastic are, right? Just use like stainless steel or glass. And certainly don't microwave with plastic, and don't put anything in plastic wrap, because that gets on your food and it is absorbed. In fact, I have a friend who does environmental surveys. One of the people I work with who does my environmental testing, if we want to go into a house and look at that. And he used to do a lot of work with scented candles, and he couldn't figure out why all these plasticizers were in the candles, you know. And then he realized that he was putting the candle in a plastic bag when he was looking at it, you know. So that stuff is absorbed pretty easily, you know. And so if it's absorbed on a candle, it's probably going to be absorbed in food. My recommendation would be to use wax paper. Don't store chemicals in the basement or garage. And the other thing I think that's important on this is ask for the material safety and data sheet. You know, everyone know what an MSD sheet is? Familiar with that? Okay, if you're buying a product and you don't know what it is, ask for the MSD sheet. I remember once my wife and I, we had some tile work done in our house. We had some new tile put in our laundry room. And the guy from Home Depot, we picked up tile, says, well, you should seal that. I said, really? I said, well, get me the MSD sheet. He says, is it safe? I said, it's safe. He says, oh, it's perfectly harmless. Yeah, you just put it on, it's no problem with the MSD sheet goes, do not use in an enclosed area. Use only in a well-ventilated area only. Use a respirator. May cause respiratory distress and death. This was on the medical safety and data sheet, and he's telling me, oh, it's perfectly safe. You know, so be an informed consumer when you buy some of these products, okay? And in general, what I can tell you about products like, for example, like beauty products, for example, if you buy a product from Europe as opposed to from China, probably the product from Europe is probably a lot safer because they invoke the precautionary principle. Product from China, I don't know what they do over there, you know? So in summary, the keys to healthy aging, you know, modified Mediterranean diet like we developed as a group, spices instead of salt or sugar, right? Remember curcumin and the impact on mTOR, okay? Sugar less than 4 grams per serving, okay? Decrease calorie consumption by eating lots of vegetables, right? Address stress and anxiety, exercise, vitamin D, 2,000 to 4,000 IUs per day, avoid unnecessary exposure to chemicals, you know, and do not smoke. Okay. So in summary, the future of healthcare belongs to those who are committed to preventing disease, not simply treating it. This will allow us to live longer, healthier, and more productive lives, and while greater understanding of the human genome will give us significant insight and tools to prevent disease in the future, lifestyle management remains the greatest single tool we have today. There's no reason to wait for a pill that may or may not be successful. It's time to start your path to a healthier tomorrow today. Allostatic load refers to the number of allostats circulating in the air, the inability of our bodies to distinguish a true stress that requires a fight or flight response from a perceived one, or the effect of stress on our ability to produce energy. B, right. You are a good audience. You're doing good. Which one of the following mimics the drug addictive effects seen with sugar? Tolerance, withdrawal, cravings, or all the above? All the above. Okay. Pleomorphic gene expression refers to blue genes, diseases we are destined to get, that we can help prevent our likelihood from getting diseases by changing our lifestyle, or D, all of the above? C, that's right. Americans' average consumption of sugar per year is A. Which one of the following is not a key to weight loss? Accountability, exercise, portion control, eating correct foods, or watching Man vs. Food? Right. mTOR is a Marvel comic book hero, an enzyme that inhibits cell proliferation and helps prevent cancer, an energy-saving device, or an acronym for a weight loss strategy? B, right. Which animal models have been shown to be the most effective strategy to prevent disease and enhance longevity? Anyone? E, 25% calorie restriction. I had to put one in there. That was tough. No, it's E. In terms of when you look at animal studies, the single most effective thing that helps prevent, that enhances longevity is calorie restriction. Insulin resistance causes all the following except A, fatty liver, B, fat in the blood, C, obesity, D, fat in our muscles, E, sarcopenia, or F, fatheads. F, right. Chronic low-level inflammation secondary to insulin resistance causes or is associated with all the following except diabetes, heart disease, dementia, erectile dysfunction, or emphysema. Emphysema, right. That's it. Thank you all very much.